During the week, there'd been several thunderstorms, and it was after the last of these on a cool Saturday evening that he was found at the top of the hill by a shepherd. His speech was incoherent and disconnected. He was wet through, and he sat there pulling a sprig of heather to pieces. He gave his name correctly, but he could or would not add any account of himself. The shepherd afterwards said that he had great difficulty in persuading him to come down from the hill, and that he talked much nonsense. In the path at the foot of the hill, he was recognised by some people from the farmhouse where he was lodging, and he was taken back there. He was subsequently removed to an asylum, where he died insane a few months later. 2 years afterwards, when the furniture of the farmhouse came to be sold at auction, there was found in a little cupboard in the bedroom which he'd occupied an ordinary penny exercise book. This was partly filled in a beautiful and very regular handwriting with what seemed to be something in the nature of a diary. And I am now going to read to you extracts from this diary. June the 1st. It is absolutely essential to be quiet. I'm beginning life again, and in quite a different way, and on quite a different scale, and I cannot make the break suddenly. I must have a pause of a few weeks in between the two different lives. I saw the advertisement for the lodgings in this farmhouse in an evening paper that somebody had left in the restaurant. That was when I was trying to make the change abruptly, and I may as well make a note of what happened. After attending the funeral, which seemed to me an act of hypocrisy because I hardly knew the man, but it was expected of me, I came back to my Charlotte Street rooms and had tea. I slept well that night. Then the next morning I went to the office at the usual hour in my best clothes and with a deep band still on my hat. I went to Mr. Toller's room and knocked. He said, "Come in," and after I'd entered, he asked me what I wanted. I explained to him that I wished to leave at once. "This seems sudden," he said, "after 30 years' service." "Yes," I replied, "I have served you faithfully for 30 years, but things have changed, and I have now 300 a year of my own. I will pay something in lieu of notice if you like, but I cannot go on being a clerk any more. I hope, Mr. Toller, that you will not think that I speak with any impertinence or immodesty, but I really am in the position of a private gentleman." He looked at me curiously, as if he didn't understand what I was saying, so I repeated, "I think I am in the position of a private gentleman." In the end, he let me go and said very politely that he was sorry to lose me. I said goodbye to the other clerks, even to those who had sometimes laughed at what they imagined to be my peculiarities, and I gave the better of the two office boys a small present in money. I went back to the Charlotte Street rooms, but there was nothing to do there. There were figures going on in my head, and my fingers seemed to be running up and down columns, and I had the stupid idea that I should be in trouble if Mr. Toller was to suddenly come in and catch me like that. So I went out and had a capital lunch, and then I went to the theatre. I took a stall right in the front row, and I sat there all by myself, and then I took a cab to a restaurant. It was too soon for dinner, so I ordered a whiskey and soda and smoked a few cigarettes. The man at the table next to me left his evening paper, and that is where I saw the advertisement for these farmhouse lodgings. I read the whole of the paper, but I've forgotten it all, except the advertisement that I could say by heart even now. It was all about bracing air and perfect quiet and the rest of it. At dinner, I had a bottle of champagne. The waiter handed me the list and asked me which I would prefer. I waved it away and said, "Give me the best." He smiled. He kept on smiling throughout dinner, and then he began to look serious. He kept getting more serious, and then he brought two other men to look at me. They spoke to me, but I did not want to talk to them. I think I fell asleep. I found myself in my rooms in Charlotte Street the next morning, and my landlady gave me notice because she said I had come home beastly drunk. And then that advertisement in the newspaper. flashed into my mind about the bracing air, and I told her that I should have given her notice in any case today, because that was not a suitable place for a gentleman. June the 3rd. I'm rather sorry that I wrote down the above. It seems so degrading. However, it was merely an act of ignorance and carelessness on my part, and besides, I'm writing solely for myself. To myself, I may freely own that I made a mistake, that I was not used to wine, and that I had not fully gauged what the effects would be. The incident is disgusting, but I simply put it behind me, and I think no more about it. I pay here £2 10 a week for my 2 rooms and board, and I take my meals by myself in the sitting room. It'd be cheaper if I took them with a family, but I do not care to do that. After all, what is £2 10 a week? Roughly speaking, £130 a year. June the 17th. I've made no entry in my diary for some days. For a certain period, I had no heart for it, or for anything else. I had told the people here that I was a private gentleman, which is strictly true, and that I was engaged in literary pursuits. Now, by the latter, I meant to imply no more than that I'm fond of reading, and that it is my intention to jot down from time to time my sensations and experiences in the new life that has burst upon me. At the same time, I have been greatly depressed. Why, I can hardly explain. I've been furious with myself, sitting in my own room with a gold-tipped cigarette between my fingers. I've been possessed, although I recognise it as an absurdity, but I've been possessed by a feeling that if Mr. Toller were to suddenly come in, I should have to get up and apologise. But the thing which depressed me most of all was the open country. I mean, I've read, of course, those penny stories about the poor little ragged boys who never see the green leaf in their lives, and I've always thought them exaggerated, and so they are. They're grotesquely exaggerated. I mean, there are the embankment gardens. There are parks, Sunday school treats. These little ragged boys see the green leaf well enough, and to say that they do not is a willful exaggeration. But to see the open country, well, that is quite a different thing. Yesterday, it was fine weather, and I was out all day in a place called Wensleydale. On one spot where I stood, I could see for miles around. There wasn't a single house or tree or human being in sight. It was just myself at the top of the moor, and the bigness of it all gave me a regular scare. I suppose I'd got used to walls. I'd got used to feeling that if I went straight ahead without stopping, I would knock against something, and that somehow made me feel safe. But out on that great moor, just as if I were the last man in the world, I do not feel safe. I find the track and get home, and I tremble like a half-drowned kitten until I see a wall again, or someone with a surly face who does not answer civilly when I speak to him. I mean, all these feelings will wear off, no doubt, and I shall be able to enter upon this new phase of my existence without any discomfort. But I was quite right to take a few months' quiet retirement. One must get used to these things gradually. It was the same with the champagne, to which, by the way, I had not meant to allude any further. June the 20th. It is remarkable what a fascination these very large moors have for me. It's not exactly fear anymore. Indeed, it must be the reverse, for now I do not care to be anywhere else. Instead of making it a mere pause between two different existences, I shall continue it. To that I have quite made up my mind. When I'm out there in a place where I cannot see any trees or houses or living things, I am the last person left alive in the world. I am a kind of God. There's nobody to think anything about me. Doesn't matter if my clothes are not right or how well I talk. I never knew what real independence was before. There's always been too many houses around, too many people looking on. It seems to me now such a common and despicable thing to live among people, and to have one's character and one's ways altered by what people are going to think. I now know that when I ordered that bottle of champagne, you see, I did it far more to please the waiter and to make him think well of me than to please myself. I pity the kind of creature that I was back then, but I'd not known the open country at that time. It is a grand education. If Mr. Toller were to come in now, I should simply say to him, "Go away, Mr. Toller. Go back to your bricks and mortar and account books and swell friends and white waistcoats and rubbish of that kind. You cannot possibly understand me. Your presence irritates me, Mr. Toller. If you do not go away at once, I will set the dog upon you." By the way, it was a curious thing which happened the other day. I feed the dog here, a mastiff, regularly, and he comes out with me. We'd walked some way and had reached the spot where a man becomes the last man alive in the world, when suddenly the dog began to howl and ran off home with its tail between its legs, as if it were frightened of something. I mean, what was it that the dog had seen and I had not seen? A ghost? Well, if the dead do come back, they might walk there without contamination. A few sheep, a sweep of heather, a grey sky, but nothing that a living man planted or built. A ghost could be alone there. If it were not that it would seem to be a kind of blasphemy, I would buy a piece of land in the very middle of the loneliest moor and build a cottage there myself. June the 23rd. I received a letter today from Julia. Of course, she does not understand the change which has taken place within me. She writes as she always used to write, and I find it very hard to remember and realise that I liked it once, that I was glad when I got a letter from her. That was before I got into the habit of going into empty places alone. The old clerking, account book life has become too small to even care about. The swell life of the private gentleman to which I so looked forward, that's also not worth considering. As for Julia, I was to have married her. I used to kiss her. She wrote to say that she thought a great deal of me. But I don't want her anymore. I don't want anything. I've become the last man alive in the world. I shall leave this farmhouse very soon. The people are all right, but they're people. I can no longer live or breathe in a place where I see people, or trees that people have planted, or houses which people have built. It's an ugly word, people. July the 7th. I was wrong in saying that I was the last man alive in the world. I believe that I'm dead. I know now why the mastiff howled and ran away. The whole moor is full of them. One sees them after a time, when one has got used to the open country, or perhaps it is because one is dead. Now I see them by moonlight and sunlight, and I'm not frightened at all. I think I must be dead, because there seems to be a line ruled straight through my life, and the things which happened on the further side of the line are not real. I look over this diary and I see references to a Mr. Toller, some champagne coming into money. I cannot for the life of me think what it's all about. I suppose that the incidents described really did happen, and that I was mad when I wrote about them. I suppose that I'm not dead, since I can write in a book, and I can eat food, I can walk and sleep and wake again. But since I see them now, the people that fill up the lonely places, I must be quite different to ordinary human beings. And if I'm not dead, then what am I? Today, I came across an old letter signed Julia Jarvis. The envelope was addressed to me. I wonder who on earth she was. July the 9th. A man in a frock coat came to see me and talked about my best interest. He wanted me, so far as I could gather, to come away with him somewhere. He said that I was all right, or at any rate I would become all right with a little care. He didn't go away until I told him that I would kill him. Then the woman at the farmhouse came up with a white face, and I told her that I would kill her too, unless she went away. I cannot endure people. Something apart, something different. I'm not alive and I'm not dead. I can't imagine what I am. July the 16th. I've settled the whole thing to my complete satisfaction. I can, without doubt, believe the evidence of my own senses. I have seen and I've heard, and I know now that I'm a god. I'd almost thought before that this might be the case. What was the matter was that I was too diffident. I had no self-confidence. I'd never heard before of any man who had become a god. I therefore supposed that it was impossible until it was distinctly proved to be so. I'd often made up my mind to go to that range of hills that lies to the north of here. They're purple when one views them from far off. At nearer view, they're grey, and then they become green, and then one sees a silver network over the green. And the silver network is made by streams descending in the sunlight. I climbed the hill slowly. The air was still and the heat was terrible. Even the water which I drank from the running stream seemed warm. And as I climbed, the storm broke. I took but little notice of it, for the dead that I had met below on the moor had told me that lightning could cause me no harm. And then at the top of the hill I turned and saw the storm raging beneath my feet. It's the greatest of mercies as I went there, for that is where the other gods gather. At such times as the lightning plays between them and the earth, and the black thunderclouds hanging low shut them out of the sight of men. Some of the gods were rather like the big pictures that I've seen on the hoardings advertising plays at the theatre, or some food which is supposed to give strength and muscular development. They were handsome in the face, but without any expression. They never seemed to be angry or pleased or hurt. They sat there in great long rows resting while the storm raged in between them and the earth. One of them was a woman. I spoke to her, and she told me that she was older than the earth, and yet she had the face of a young girl. And her eyes were like eyes that I've seen somewhere before. I cannot think where I saw the eyes like those of the goddess, but perhaps it was in that part of my life which is forgotten, ruled off with a line. It gave me one of the greatest, most majestic feelings to stand there with the other gods and to know that one was a god oneself and that lightning could not hurt me and that I would live forever. July the 18th. This afternoon the storm returned, and I hurried to the meeting place. But it is far away to the hills, and though I climbed as quickly as I could, the storm had almost passed, and they had gone. August the 1st. I was told in my sleep that tomorrow I was to go back to the hill again, and that once more the gods would be there, and that the storm would gather round us and would shut us from profane sight, and the steely lightnings would blind any eye that tried to look upon us. For this reason, I have refused now to eat or drink anything. I'm a god. I have no need of such things. It's strange that now, when I see all real things so clearly and easily, and the ghosts of the dead that walk across the moors in sunlight, the concourse of the gods on the hilltop above the storm, men and women with whom I once moved before I became a god, are no more to me than so many black shadows. I scarcely know one from another. Only the presence of a black shadow anywhere near me makes me angry. I desire to kill it. That will pass away. It's probably some faint relic of the thing that I once was, and the other side of my life, on the other side of the line which has been ruled across my life. Seeing that I am a god, it's not natural that I should feel anger or joy anymore. Already, all feeling of joy has quite gone from me. For tomorrow, so I was told in my sleep, I'm to be betrothed to the beautiful goddess that is older than the world and yet looks like a young girl. And she is to give me a sprig of heather as a token. It was on the evening of August the 1st that the shepherd found him.